we had gone to a IVF clinic in Sandy, I think it was, Sandy or Draper area. And I just wanted to talk to one of the, somebody there, but nobody would talk. And we didn't go into the office and bother them or anything, but we waited for them to come in. And when they came in, somebody was walking in and said, "Hey, I'd like to, I asked them if I could talk with them, and they said, yeah. And I asked them a couple of questions, and they said, well, I just work here for doing schedule and things like that, so she didn't really know. And so I tried to explain it to her a little bit, and they came out. And it looked just like Planned Parenthood, where they come out and they escorted her in, and they was like, don't talk to her. And that's what I was explaining to you, is like, I didn't think that he would talk, because what we had talked about was more of like, right, quote unquote, ethical. But what is ethical? And I would say that there is no ethical IVF, because we didn't even talk about some of those things that would be like gender, right? You got gender, you have the sex trafficking or child like selling, genetics, all of those things that are would be really awful. We didn't even talk about those. But what about like?
He doesn't do those things either.
What about selective reduction? Does he do that?
No, he won't do that.
In the womb, selective reduction. So then there's that though.
There's a lot of stuff that he doesn't do, because he doesn't have more morals than a lot of them.
Well,
so a lot of stuff he doesn't do. He won't send them to do sex stuff. He won't send them to do anything to the embryo.
but we know most of them are, right? Most of them are doing that.
Yeah.
So what about those ones where he does you'd say, okay, in the womb selective reduction maybe he doesn't do, but he does do it beforehand with ones that would be not viable, or what he would say not viable in that initial one, right? The initial.
But they let them phase themselves out.
I think you're gonna stay in
If the ones that aren't doing well, they just kind of let them go.
yeah, just a little bit.
So they just let them die, yeah.
Like if they're abnormal and they're not multiplying and doing what they're supposed to do, then they
let them die.
Well, they just kind of because nothing they can
Let
do.
them go, yeah. So that's a question that brings up the grading. Some of them, and this is something I just found out recently, that grading can change. Like they can become better or worse, and the grading can actually be adjusted.
Say that again.
So grading, like if they
Great.
look at them and grade them, some of them can be graded at a certain
Right.
grade scale, yeah, and that can adjust, so they could actually get better or worse.
I haven't seen that.
No.
Haven't seen that. Usually,
But they do adjust
unless
it.
they've frozen them and they refreeze them. Sometimes that might damage them a little bit. But
Well, if you were frozen and then thawed and then refrozen, it'd damage you a little bit too, right?
but they go through the grades and they tell them we have an A, we have a B, we have this many, and so sometimes if they have one like a C, they'll just put it in, because they don't know if they probably think it probably won't survive, but it could. So sometimes they'll put them in, but they let the patient decide. Which ones, how many do you want? Which ones do you want? And most of the ones keep coming back and use up all their eggs.
How does he present that to them, as in like which ones do you want? Or does he let them know, hey, these are babies that are alive, and which ones do you want? Or do they say, which baby do you want? Or is he more of like present it as, well, these are just cells that are multiplying? Because they do the same thing. These are just cells.
Well, he says we have an A that looks super really good, and we have a B or whatever. So he says, this is what we put in. This is what this is what you're okay with. This is what we're going to put in, and this is what we have left. That hasn't been unfrozen, and so they have a list of them. This many ABs and A, and this.
But does the clarity to those people, those parents, is he very clear that these are all babies?
No,
he's not that clear.
No, they're alive. No, they're alive.
I know, but is he clear to them?
No,
Do they? Because when I talk to parents that have gone through IVF, this is one of the things that's really kind of, I can see the devastation when they realize that instead of Planned Parenthood goes in, somebody goes into Planned Parenthood, they're going in to kill one, sometimes more, but usually, sometimes twins. We have a rescue that was from twins that we're helping now, but they have they normally go in for one to kill one baby. But when you go in for IVF, you're trying to have one baby, but you're killing 29 out of 30. So there's a lot.
But they still get used. Most of them get used, but there are when they get
Yeah,
alive,
but I'm saying they
don't
die
go.
intentionally sometimes, usually, or unintentionally through freezing it through our hands as humans. They're dying through either freezing, unfreezing, selective reduction before the womb, out of the womb, and so they are actually dying. So when they go in there and say, okay, you have one baby, how would you like to, under Utah law, we have to bury that one baby. But for IVF, they're babies at 5 days old in that gestational age, and they're not saying we have 29 babies that died. How would you like us to bury them? They're not saying the same thing. They're treated differently.
Well, they don't all die like that.
No, but they die through our hands. They don't all die the same way
No,
in
there's
Planned
some
Parenthood.
that the parents don't come back and get.
Okay, so what about one baby? If they say, okay, this one is, the parents don't want these healthy embryos, they don't want them anymore, and they're not going to give them for adoption. They've expired because we did not implant them in the womb. They were healthy. How would you like to bury them? Do they say that?
Yeah, no, because
No.
he keeps them. He just keeps them until.
But they expire. They die.
Most of them can. They still stay.
One. Let's talk about one. See, we go
Right,
back.
yeah.
We go back
Well,
to
I
the
know.
ethical, right? Or
I
want to
know.
try to stay ethical, but that's my point. Is I don't see an ethical IVF.
But it is up to them, up to the patient.
Yeah, but that's up to them here.
Right.
So you see where I'm going with that,
no,
right?
I know, and it's hard.
That's why I was wondering,
Also
how are you
wonderful-
reconciling that, knowing that?
Well, it is wonderful to see these.
So you reconcile it by saying if one's alive, then it's okay for the others?
No, I'm saying if these women who can't get babies, it's a great thing for them. 'Cause
To
they
have
can-
one.
Well, most of them come back. Most
Well-
of them I see come back and get most of their eggs. There's a few that don't, but most of them come back and they.
Is it
find
worth
second
killing the
year,
others? Is it worth the other ones dying to have the one?
But not all of them.
No,
die.
is it worth the ones dying to have the one?
To them, it probably is. I mean, I would probably have a different point of view, but to the people that's getting babies, to
Then
them it's great because
do you think it's okay if they said we have 10 babies here? I can guarantee you one child, but we're going to have 10 and we're going to have to kill 9, but it's great because you're going to have one, but we're going to have to kill the other 9 and they're going to be 2 weeks old. Is that okay?
But you don't have to kill them. They do.
You don't have to, but they do.
But they stay.
Is that okay?
But they stay for years. They can be years in the frozen.
My question is it okay if the parents want to kill those 9 in order to have the one at 2 weeks
No,
old?
but hopefully
No.
they wouldn't kill them.
Hopefully they wouldn't, but hopefully they won't kill them inside
hopefully
Planned
they'll
Parenthood.
come back in a year or two, and then they'll get another one, and they'll come back in a year or two, and they'll get another one, and then they'll have a family.
They already have a family, but they have family that's dead, that's
Right.
killed through this process.
Right,
That's the point. There is no ethical IVF. That's my point. And so how do you reconcile that? It's hard to reconcile when you think of him as every baby's life is valuable, not just kill some to have some and it's a great thing because you have a baby. And that's the way politicians look at it. Look at we're pro-life. We're creating life here with IVF process, but nobody's talking about the ones that are dying through the process. And even the pro-life laws and the pro-life states and the pro-life people are saying, don't talk about that. And we're not even gonna uphold laws that we've made for the babies that we're killing here. We're not gonna hold the same laws for us with the ones that we're killing through the IVF process.
Well, and some babies don't make it naturally. There's lots of miscarriages.
No,
that
that's
they don't
not.
make
That's
it
different.
naturally.
I'm not talking about
Right,
That's
well,
not a
it's on
murder.
purpose. No,
That's
but
not
it
a murder.
does-
That's not
So
a
some of those embryos you put in, you know, there's a chance they're going to miscarry
Some.
just because that's a
some.
can miscarry without the, going through the
You,
process.
but you keep going back to some as well. Some of them will die naturally, not necessarily, but I mean we have a different view. But there's others that don't die naturally. What about them? What about them? I know I keep going back to like let's try to figure out a ethical. Let's try to find the ethical path. And there, I would argue that there's no ethical path.
No, well, people can adopt embryos, you know.
Well, can, but they don't. We have how many frozen?
Well, we have a lot.
Well, I think that
They
through the
can.
laws that we should say that no more IVF and we need to adopt the ones in there. I would say, yeah, for that. But that's not what's happening. So when somebody goes in to your lab and he says, okay, I want to pay X amount of money, how much does it cost for IVF, the process? 10,000, 100,000, 9,000 for each pregnancy.
No, once they're frozen, then they come back and it's only 1,500.
Okay.
And so it's
So 9,000 initially and then 1,500 to implant?
no 15. If you come back in like in 2 years,
Uh-huh.
you get another one, then it's 1,500 to put that one in.
In. So it's 9,000 for the first one and then 1,500 additionally.
Well, they're all taken out at the same time.
Right. So it's 9,000
Yeah.
initially.
Yeah. And then they freeze them, and then they come back every year, 2 years, and they get,
Until they don't want anymore.
or they've used them all up.
Or until they don't, or unless they don't want anymore.
Right.
So if they don't want anymore and those embryos are frozen, then and the next person comes in and says, hey, I want a baby, does he say, hey, I can save you? There's embryos, this process is already done, we have some frozen that they don't want, you can adopt those instead, or does he say, well, it'll cost this much?
Well, they want their own baby. With
Right, that's what I see. See the problem?
No, I see. No, I see it, and it's there's definitely gray areas, but it's also.
Oh, it's black and white.
But it helps a lot of families.
I think the gray areas are created by trying to figure out an ethical point of view, and I think it's very black and white that these babies are dying, and that you can't find an ethical view for a reason to let babies die.
But they're not all dying. Not as many.
I'm not talking about the ones that are alive. I'm happy that they're alive.
Right.
I'm talking about the ones that are dying.
Right.
See what I mean? It keeps going back to, well, what about the ones that are alive? But that's what their argument. See, Planned Parenthood argument right here would say, this saves women's lives. This is health care, right? That's what they're saying. So now what in a way it sounds like it's like, yes, but this is health care. This is saving families. This is creating families. It's healthcare. It's a good thing. And that's the same argument that they're
They
using.
can be frozen for 20 years and be fine. I mean, I'm just saying.
Do any of them die during the freezing process?
Some.
Okay,
But
some.
of them would
Some die.
Anyway, you know.
But what about the ones that wouldn't die anyway?
We don't know.
Yeah, we do. Because what historically has happened, if we go to history and say, when I look at a politician, I don't say, what are you saying to me that I can trust for the future? What I say is, what have you done in the past that I can trust you in the future? So when I look at IVF and I say, okay, what does history say? History says that there are basically kids for sale. There is murdering. There's genetics. There is selective reduction, which is genetics. We'll take the ones we want. There's all of these things that's the history. So 93% of the babies over history die. Then what about the future? What's going to happen? Well, the argument you hear is, yes, but there's babies, there's whatever, and it might not, but history says that it will happen. It's a yes, it will. It's not a maybe not. No, it's definite, because that's a history. Even IVF labs say there is no way for us to do IVF without killing children. That's what happened in the Alabama Supreme Court case. That's what happened here in Utah. Very much similar. But in Utah, we're going, oh, we don't want to look at that. We don't want to see that. Let's talk about the some that are alive. That's every politician in the country. Well, not every. We have ones that are fighting for the rights of the babies, and they come and they go. Right now, a good example is Dusty Deaver's fighting ethically for the lives of these children, and he knows more about IVF than us put together, because he's got a booklet on it under Rescue Those, and talks about it. It's fantastic. He knows all about it. So I can't sit there and go, well, maybe this, maybe that with him, because he knows all about it. So there are a few and those are the experts. And then you have those other ones that are saying, like Ted Cruz and even Mike Johnson, don't do that because it'll cost us votes. That's the most important thing. It'll cost us political votes, and we want to be elected into office. And then they go to the things where they say, well, we got to do incremental, we got to do this slowly. How long are we going to do this? And it's the same argument, some. And I would say there's no ethical reason to kill babies. And if there is, answer that. What is an ethical reason to kill a baby through IVF? So the trigger law, and I'll give you an example and then you can try to answer the other. The trigger law says if you can't kill a child except for the reasons of rape, incest, and mother's life. This is the law that pro-life Utah has been fighting for, right? And they have the trigger law. You can't kill a baby because of rape, incest, and mother's life. This is the Latter-day Saint Church says the same thing. This is what they would say ethical. The ethical killing of a child. It is a killing of a child, and they agree, but it's an ethical way of killing. So if that's the only ethical way, you can't tell me that there's a mother's life in danger through IVF. You can't tell me there was rape or incest in IVF, but you're still killing children. So how is IVF ethical if that's already been defined as ethical? Can you find it?
I don't know.
Yeah, I know. And I'm not trying to be hard, but I am being brutally honest maybe, but
no, I understand.
not hard on you.
No, and I've worried about it, and I asked him about it, but I also see he does do extra care to keep them.
That's him.
But not
it's still not ethical.
But I know he doesn't send them out to have sex selection and all that stuff.
Yeah, that's a horrible thing. I just learned about that recently, how that happens. And selective reduction happens through like an ultrasound and a needle, and they basically inject those babies and give them a heart attack in the womb. And then they're like either mummified or they, at certain ages, I guess, they are absorbed into the mother's body. And it's just that's an awful, awful, sick process of selective reduction that would still be on the side of ethical. Blows my mind.
Careful with them when they put them in. It's really slow.
Not everybody.
No, well, I know, but
if you do one for one and you do it to the other, I mean, if one does it differently than another, we're still doing it as a whole.
Everybody's different. Different labs have different ways they do it. Different.
But if everybody's different, there's still a right and wrong.
No, there is. And I worry.
And I'd like to know the right way.
Well, I worry about that, but I also think great things happen too. So these women have been trying for years and years and can't get babies, and they finally can get babies. And so I see this other wonderful side, but I know there's a bad side to it too.
It's a horrible side. And I mean, if that's the argument, it's okay to kill babies if you have some, then we'll look at the percentage, and you have 93% of the babies. We're talking about if you take 10 and you kill 9 and you have 1, then that's actually a better percentage than what IVF gives. 93%. You'd have to take a...
So I'll give you a visual representation. If you shoot that baby in the head right there, you can have 3 other kids. Does that ever work?
No,
Never. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. You're creating life and you're killing life to make a life. Never okay.
That's the part where I would argue that there's no ethical way to kill a child to have a child. even though having that child is wonderful to have a child. But
Some
God
of
is
them all-
God's
some of them all
sovereignty.
live, and some of them all get put in. And
Some.
Sometimes, but a lot of the times they don't. And then if you put in 5 embryos, babies, knowing that probably 4 of them are going to die, you've just willfully endangered.
my doctor, he would never put 4 in ever.
He wouldn't, but that happens all the time.
I know, but he wouldn't. He won't put over 3. I mean, he won't put 2. So usually he'll put, unless they're 45 years old. he'll
What
put
if
3 in.
what if somebody says, "No, that's okay. Give me 5."
He wouldn't do it.
But what if he says, "Look, most likely one's going to die if we put 2 in." He'll still put 2. Because most like how many? What's the average? What would be the higher percentage when he puts 2 in? What's the higher percentage? 1 or 2 that are born? Would 1?
Well, there's
1.
they have a lot of twins.
Okay, but no, I'm saying the higher percentage.
50% are having twins when they put 2 in.
So the higher percentage
that's
is
up to the
1.
body
So
to
you
take
look
care
in,
of
but the
that,
higher
but-
percentage.
Yeah, but then that's the point is if I say I'm going to put my kids, I'm going to take both of them, I'm going to put them in a situation in which they have a 50% chance at life in the hopes that one of them will grow up to be bigger. That's child endangerment, plain and simple. Any way I do that, that's child endangerment. And so we try to like play God and make babies outside of the womb. And babies are wonderful, especially in any case, but if you're trying to thwart the hand of God, you get yourself into these tangles. Like you can't.
You're trying to justify
Yeah, you
an ethical and right way to do it.
Yeah.